Insect Armageddon released in 2011, 4 years after Earth Defense Force 2017, and it's a disappointment in nearly every way imaginable. It was developed by an American studio this time around, and given that information, it seems likely that Insect Armageddon was an attempt to westernize the series to appeal to a wider audience. Thankfully, it's firmly a spin-off, one that can be easily ignored these days thanks to the newer and far better Earth Defense Force games that are easily accessible on modern devices, but at the time, this was the only other EDF game North America had. Considering that it looked to be a sequel, one with a higher budget, I'd imagine at least a handful of people played this instead of 2017, which is extremely unfortunate. On a surface level, it looks like EDF. You shoot bugs and robots with friends, but when digging deeper, it's not Earth Defense Force in the ways that count. Now, just because this review is mostly negative doesn't mean there aren't some aspects worth praising. I do think there are some bright spots here. While 2017 only had split-screen co-op, Insect Armageddon had online functionality at the start, and expanded the total number of players to 3 at a time instead of 2. My friend likely doesn't see it this way, but given that the game is readily available on PC, it's very easy to play this game online with your buddies to this day, which is a tremendous step up from 2017's isolation on the Xbox. In terms of gameplay, you can now sprint as a regular soldier, which is nice. You can also now revive teammates instead of them being dead for the rest of the mission. Another outright improvement, one that even the mainline games in the series haven't implemented, is that the items on the map are now visually distinct. Health is a blue cross, weapons are a yellow cross. This makes it far more clear at a glance which item is which on the battlefield. Finally, the vehicles aren't pathetically weak anymore, they last much longer in combat and can genuinely be useful. Well, that was quick. Those are the only objective positives I can throw at the game that don't come with some level of criticism. The level structure is very bland, both from a visual perspective, but also from a creative standpoint. This is New Detroit, and it's the only environment you're going to see for the entire game. While with 2017, it didn't make a whole lot of sense why this squad was being teleported to so many different locations, that part didn't really matter. The game wasn't trying to instill a sense of place or immerse us in a cohesive world. It was purely about providing a variety of settings to blast bugs and robots in. The gameplay itself can already get a little repetitive, so the constant shift to new battlegrounds keeps things feeling fresh where it could otherwise get stale pretty quickly. It is kind of interesting to see a day in the life, so to speak, of an EDF soldier, focusing on this unit and their squad while they follow through with this singular mission in New Detroit. However, the attempt at a more realistic setting and mission structure ultimately is their undoing, as, if anything, it makes this alien war feel a lot more localized and closed in. In 2017, we sought out their Queen and King variations, either underground or in certain parts of the city. We kept chasing that quadruped fortress, we went after the mothership in a final battle. In Insect Armageddon, the Queen Ant thing is just in New Detroit, as is the Cube, which is some sort of gigantic bomb, and afterwards the mothership comes to pay a visit. It might feel anticlimactic if these big events didn't happen, but the setting being the same throughout the whole game blurs everything together. The only mission my friends could definitely remember, after I forced them to play it with me 3 times, is the ditch level, because it's so fucking terrible. What makes this even more ridiculous is that there are only 15 levels in the entire game. One could make the argument that the mainline games are jamming in a little too many missions as it is, but 15 is abysmal. 2017 had 53 missions, and that was basically a budget title. Fewer levels and less variety is about the worst combination you could come up with for a game like this. Replayability is a core part of the series, and the varied environments and relatively short excursions pair well with that. In this game, you have 4 classes and 3 difficulties, meaning they were trying to keep the replayability factor, but must not have realized how poorly that mixed with their low mission count and static New Detroit environment. Even if you choose not to play all of the classes, with how slow your level up bar fills after a while, you're gonna have to play the game at least a few times to see it go all the way up. This means having to play these samey, unremarkable missions in this boring and drab setting over and over. The heavy focus on objectives this time around feels entirely pointless. I really don't know what's gained by making you go here, kill bugs, destroy anthill, go here, wait for orders, new level, check out lander, destroy lander, check out lander, destroy lander, go here, just stop, let me play the game. The sheer number of times we were told to track down a lander, only to blow it up, it was nearly becoming a parody of itself after a while.
Intel, this is getting kind of old.
The amount of dialogue certainly points to this game having a bigger focus on story, however, there's really not much there. You're dropped off, you run to a bunch of downed landers, you travel to an island, you come back, you acquire a top-secret cube, you plant that explosive in a bug nest, you're left stranded as the bomb detonates. You don't even get to see the results of your labor, the game doesn't show the bomb detonating, and the mothership that appeared out of nowhere seems a lot more interesting than the fricking nest we supposedly took care of, but we never even interact with it. The game also ends rather abruptly, so much so that my friends and I couldn't believe we finished the game.
Did we lose?
Die?
What was the point of shooting the things at the end? The mission was over.
Wait.
Don't you dare break my heart.
Why?
Oh, we beat the game. That was the game.
What?
That was the last mission?
What? Are you sure?
Lemon Squeezy is beat the game on normal.
Hey, we did it!
Part of our surprise was due to how few missions there were in the first place, but even still, the ending is entirely underwhelming on its own. Well, good job,
That's really
guys.
anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Why would you shoot the thing? It's literally the end of the game. Why? I wonder
Wait.
if, like, you shoot enough, like, if you, like, do enough things, maybe you don't die.
We didn't get the credits? Very strange. After the final mission, the fate of Lightning Squad is determined by which difficulty you played on, for some reason. Considering the intercom ops lady, the one who has more voice lines than any other character, feels awfully reminiscent of Cortana from Halo, it's my suspicion that this difficulty-influenced true ending shenanigans was taken from that series as well. The voice for the protagonist also feels Halo-adjacent, filling the role of a gruff and tough super soldier.
Won't be good.
Copy that.
Your vicinity. Get a move on, Lightning.
We copy.
The location and regroup.
Affirmative.
Lightning, take care of those spiders before proceeding.
Roger. Engaging spiders.
I spotted that it was Steve Blum, the guy who was Tom on Toonami, basically right away, as his voice is near iconic at this point. A very odd fit for a supposed tongue-in-cheek campy sci-fi game. He doesn't speak much, so I'm not sure why they went with splurging on a well-known voice actor. The ops lady has roughly 80% of the dialogue, so if anything, I would think it would make more sense to spend more on that role than the main character. Parmandir Nagra does do a good job though, and I actually found myself quite enjoying her lines the more I played, but the casting itself is just so strange. This is her only voice acting credit for a video game. Bend It Like Beckham is an all-time classic movie, yes, but usually the casting for voice actors in games is, you know, professional voice actors. With that in mind, maybe they did spend more on her than on Steve. The overall mood of a game is shaped in part by the dialogue, especially when it's supposed to be campy and over-the-top, and Insect Armageddon completely misses the mark. You can tell they were trying to be funny, but they've lost the sincerity found in the original game, and instead went in an entirely different direction. I've seen plenty of journalists in 2011 claim that Insect Armageddon is faithful to the cheesy tone the series has had so far, but I wholeheartedly disagree. Have a listen to some of the random voice lines throughout, which are clearly going for laughs.
So what do you say we all move here, start a construction company after this is all done? Work to my mother-in-law. Woo! Forgot my deodorant this morning. They're gonna have to burn this armor when this is done.
Here, Skies. All right, you'll notice that your seats are equipped with FS-4611 auto turrets. You may use them to blow the living hell out of any of those Ravager bastards that you might see. And in the event of a water landing, we will probably all die. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for takeoff. Please return all tables and seatbacks to an upright position as we begin our descent to... never mind. We're here. Happy hunting, Lightning.
These bugs are nothing. I grew up killing roaches down in Houston, baby. Now those are some big bugs. You know, I was kind of hoping for little green men with ray guns, you know what I'm saying?
Perhaps this is simply due to the Western perspective. This is what you might expect to hear when Americans make a campy piece of media. It's trying to strike a balance of serious stakes, less serious characters, and wacky scenarios all at the same time. Where this all falls apart for me is with the less serious characters factor, since the moment they turn into jokey joke comedians, trying to make the audience laugh with their hilarious one-liners, the cheesiness becomes entirely unfunny. There's an art to making something so bad it's good, and when you make your mechanized monsters more resemble an ominous War of the Worlds type of threat, opposed to a goofy-looking, flailing robot, and when all of the characters speak like they're comedy relief instead of playing the straight man to this zany situation, it feels like you're just watching a generic action movie, albeit one with more bugs. Starship Troopers, this is not. If anything, it's Men in Black.
I'm sorry. Was that your auntie? Then that must mean that that's your uncle then, huh?
Hey, Ravager bastard! Yeah, I killed your brother, and I'm gonna kill you!
In fact, a good way to sum up this entire complaint is to say, Earth Defense Force 2017 feels like a kaiju movie, and Insect Armageddon is a Will Smith blockbuster. Yes, both can be funny, but not in the same way.
Welcome to Earth.
Yeah, welcome to Earth, stupid bugs!
That said, where it crossed the line back into stupid funny territory was with the true ending. Like I said, the difficulty determines the ending cutscene. You supposedly get blown up with ops saying lightning over and over on normal,
Lightning!
and on Inferno it picks right back up with the extremely annoying pilot banter.
And that the remainder of our trip will be smooth and easy. Crew members will be serving beverages and snacks if you want them.
Except this time, I don't even have words for it. Just have a listen.
Of our flight.
You know, Lightning, my name actually is Roger. Roger Ops.
Roger. My name actually is Lightning Alpha Roger.
Lightning, I love you.
Ooh, do I hear wedding bells? You know, I am not just a captain. I am also an ordained minister.
Roger Alpha. I like the sound of that.
Roger, Roger.
I will admit, when hearing that dialogue for the first time, I found myself on the verge of tears, unable to hold back from laughing hysterically. Like, this is terrible, and it's not a good fit for EDF, but something about how utterly dumb it was just sent me. It feels like an Adult Swim sketch, like something out of C-Lab 2021 or Robot Chicken. An easy word you could use to describe it would be irreverent, and I think the definition of that word sums up Insect Armageddon nicely in a way. In EDF 2017, the characters take these wacky situations seriously, whereas here, the characters take these serious situations wacky, if that makes any sense. While the enemies are named after their 2017 counterparts, it's hard to pretend that these dudes are supposedly Hectors. That being said, it feels wrong to claim that the existence of a new take on a classic enemy design is inherently a flaw. After all, Wizrobes and other Zelda enemies have had radical transformations over the years as well, and if anything, it makes that series more interesting. In a way, it is kind of neat to see a different interpretation of the EDF monsters, but it's easy to see how these iterations are inferior. The Hectors in 2017 had dramatic reactions to your shots, which not only looked silly, it made your weapons feel more impactful and provided a bit of tactics to the fight. Firing at the gun that's aiming at you will more often than not make them miss. These Hectors don't react at all to your shots, they just run around and make whale noises, another thing seemingly ripped from War of the Worlds. Their visual design is striking, however, it falls into the trap that everything else does in Insect Armageddon. Its presentation is far too serious and cool looking. The black and red color scheme is uniform with all of the Ravager technology, and it just hits me as an edgy artistic choice, something made specifically to look ominous and cool. Perhaps this is an overstatement on my part, however, as the bomber spiders look downright ridiculous. No way anyone who caught a glimpse of that enemy would think this is the new hip game on the block. There's roughly the same amount of enemy types in this game, but it feels like there are fewer, and that's mostly to do with the visual design and the modified spiders and ants themselves. A color palette swap is usually met with an eye roll by most players, but in EDF, a series that doesn't take itself seriously in the first place, there being multicolored ants fits right in. I think it goes a long way in spicing up the visuals as well, since you won't be staring at black and brown all the time, which is very much the case in Insect Armageddon. The biomechanical versions of the ants and spiders, while fitting with the Hectors and gunships, make the battlefield look pretty homogeneous. They're certainly stronger, but that's far less interesting to me than the black and red ant differences in the first game. You aren't able to shoot the anthills to remove them from the battlefield anymore, they just cave in and come back. You now have to plant an explosive, and let me tell you, this is a terrible mechanic. On higher difficulties especially, or on Remix, finding the time to plant one of these charges is infuriating, since if anything touches you, it resets the progress bar. Just awful. The carriers still drop bugs and have a weak spot, but the visual clarity is really poor here. The openings are fair game, but the back of the ship is as well, that red circle that's always there. You can only fire at that part of the ship when the carrier opens up, which doesn't seem to make much sense. You could argue that they need to drop their shields to let the ants and spiders loose, but I still think the circle should have changed color or something to indicate that it's now a weak point. The Hectors in this game are like the carriers, apparently, where they have weak spots you're supposed to target. It definitely feels like they take damage when hit with explosives in other parts of their body, which is what the fandom page mentions as well. Either way, the game is clearly trying to encourage a player to shoot that spot on their chest, and it makes no sense to me at all. It's one thing to ask a player to hit a barely moving, gigantic target from far away, but when the weak spots are relatively small, and the enemy itself runs around the map without care, like, why did they do this? The gunships and wasps are just as annoying. They don't have a specific weak spot, but they move so fast it's hard to keep them in your sights with a non-homing weapon. I'd imagine the idea is to wait until they stop moving and fire, but they don't have consistent pause times, they don't stay still long enough to balance out with how fast they move normally, and the wasps themselves seem to fly as high as the sky will allow on a moment's notice. As bad as that is, that's nothing compared to the tickers. These can come from the bomber spider, as well as just from nowhere sometimes. They attach onto you, and you need to press a button rapidly to get rid of them, otherwise you'll take a crazy amount of damage. They're fast and tiny, meaning they're hard to hit. These enemies are simply the worst part of the game without question. Not only are they annoying, seemingly for the sake of it, they completely go against one of the biggest strengths of this series. The enemies are supposed to be big, not small, and especially not fast and small. I would say perhaps these guys are more manageable for keyboard and mouse users, but I know that can't be the case, since both of my friends were using keyboard and mouse, and they both fucking hated these dudes. When you do hit them, they just pop like they're made of air, which is underwhelming. Going back to my Halo comparisons, these guys feel awfully similar to the Flood, don't they? Killing them elicits zero satisfaction, but then again, that's the case for everything in Insect Armageddon. The ants and spiders no longer spew out a comical amount of bug juice when you fire at them, and only with certain guns do they visually react to your shots. The Hectors, like I've said, don't give any indication that you've even hit them unless you get their weak spot, and the gunships don't do anything until the final hit as well. The corpses of the bugs dematerialize almost immediately. Perhaps an economical decision to fit with the game's engine and added debris from cars and buildings, but even still, it certainly lessens the punch of your supposedly powerful weaponry. The visual spectacle of the ants and spiders flying all over was also part of the campy humor found in 2017, which is missed dearly in this game. Maybe that fits with the idea I proposed earlier though. These are serious situations with less than serious characters, not the other way around, so the physical comedy can't have the spotlight or it won't strike the balance the designers were going for. For me, the worst part of all of this was the lack of rumble in the controller. For keyboard and mouse users, along with controller players who always turn the vibration off, this won't resonate at all, but for shooting games especially, feeling the controller as I fire a gun helps me feel the impact of my weapon, and can even convey the cadence of the shots. There's not much in the way of visuals when you pull the trigger, and many homing weapons, and even some normal bullet types, sound absolutely pathetic. It's sometimes tough to even notice when you've actually fired your guns, so the last bastion of hope for me was the controller, which doesn't vibrate when firing. Instead, it rumbles when you get hit, or when something in the environment blows up. Everything relating to shooting in Insect Armageddon just feels so hollow, it's almost like I'm watching someone else play a game. Finishing up with the enemies finally, the big boy Hector reminds me of Big O, which is kind of cool, but the little orange weak spot reminds me of a tangerine, which is goofy given how the rest of it looks. The daddy longleg spider is a nice addition, but it doesn't show up that often. I'd gladly take more of those over the goddamn bomber spiders. The robot praying mantises are also new, and their moveset is okay, but they have one unique quality to them that annoyed me to no end. They're the only robot and or insect that explodes when defeated, so every single time I kill one, I get excited to grab the health and weapon, then get blasted in the face by an explosion. The carriers this time also cause an explosion when falling down, which is very unexpected coming from 2017, and doubly unexpected after playing 4.1 and 5, since that never happens in those games. Something I would have liked to include in the positive section are the multiple different classes available. I do like the implementation in 4.1 and 5, and if it did influence Sandlot to keep those archetypes, then sure, I'd say it was a positive 100%. I just don't know if that's the case, though. The Jet is definitely an homage to one of the classes found in Global Defense Force, the second game in the series, and the other two classes feel very similar to the Ranger, but with a few unique guns and gimmicks. For example, in 2017 you had access to turrets as well, so the tactical unit having them isn't adding something new to the game. The fact that you can hold a turret, mines, and a radar, along with your base weapons, however, is pretty good, so it's at the very least more forgiving than 2017 was with its rigid 2 weapon slots for any and all equipment options. The radar, however, is a perfect example of what not to do when making unique classes for a game and a series that hadn't had them already. Seeing enemies on your minimap was just the standard in 2017, but now, unless you have a tactical unit with the radar, you don't get to see them. Removing an established mechanic or feature to prop up a newly added class system feels pretty bad. It's one thing to add something to the game that only certain characters can do or use, but it's another to remove something for 3/4 of the players just so one class can feel more special. The jet is fast, and the mechanic of their fuel being used for flying as well as their ammo is a great one. I'll likely talk about that more in the 4.1 video though, since I don't think its execution is as good in this game. The battle unit is the equivalent to what will be the Fencer in 4.1. When playing with friends, it felt like the battle kind of got lost in the shuffle, but when playing alone, I found him to be pretty enjoyable. The shield fly swatter thing is a cool power, and is very helpful against the tickers especially. The big blast doohickey is alright as well, and the shield of course comes in handy. Not as interesting as the fencers are in the future games, as are any of these units actually, since the weapon differences in Insect Armageddon feel arbitrary, where in 4.1 and 5 they feel like an extension of that class. Oh, the battle can't use a sniper. Okay, who cares? Their missiles and whatnot feel almost the same as the trooper and tactical. He also runs just about as fast as the others, so his mode of traversal feels almost identical to the non-flying units. The trooper is just the regular soldier from EDF 2017. He can utilize basically every weapon type there is, and is supposedly a balanced little guy. Each class gets their own weapons, and I don't care enough to give any of them the spotlight, but with how quick some of the enemies are, and the specific weak spots for the Hectors and Carriers, it definitely feels like the game is heavily encouraging the use of homing weapons. This, coupled with the fact that they can lay down turrets to automatically take out the tickers and gunships without hassle, makes me think the tactical unit is actually the best in the game. They have a great assortment of homing shotguns and assault rifles, even some easy-to-use auto-target missile launchers, in addition to the tremendous turrets that basically function as an extra squad mate. Seems rather odd that the support class is so powerful, but perhaps this feels different when on Inferno with a group of friends. Also, their weakness on the intro select screen is baffling to me. Weakness is flying enemies? Even though they're the best at taking down flying enemies. Okay, bud. Where in the previous game you'd collect armor and weapons as part of the central gameplay loop, in Insect Armageddon, that's basically been all but removed. Bigger enemies drop a single weapon, and the game tells you right then and there if it's a new one or not. Only certain guns can be acquired this way, as most of them are locked behind a shop system of sorts, in addition to a level requirement. Every time you level up, that class's max health increases, they may unlock a special gimmick thing like a new turret for the tactical, and a handful of weapons become available for purchase. It's again interesting how you could very easily describe Insect Armageddon as having an RPG leveling system and be technically correct, just like you could for EDF 2017, but the way they're implemented makes a world of difference, and that isn't conveyed by the shorthand description a genre tag would contain. You could argue that none of this should even matter. RPG leveling systems are very much in the background. What matters is the core mechanics and the gameplay on offer. I would normally agree, but in EDF, collecting stuff to improve your character is part of the gameplay. Chasing down every armor drop and weapon pickup in between blasting bugs is strangely enjoyable. Collecting things in video games can be fun or tedious depending on the execution, but in EDF 2017, it felt satisfying, provided an audible feedback that made sure you knew you obtained the item, and it incrementally improved your character. It might sound silly, but I feel far more involved with my maximum health pool in the EDF series than I ever have with other games that feature leveling systems. You aren't working towards a level up bar so the game can give you more health, you're grabbing that health yourself, one by one. Well, this isn't the case in Insect Armageddon. In a way, I get it. Scattering boxes all over the map for the player to collect while they shoot at robots sounds super weird on the surface. Maybe the developers thought newcomers would get turned off by it. Maybe they thought the act of rolling around to nab every drop was the worst part of 2017. Who knows? All I can say is a level up bar is far less engaging than collecting armor yourself. You level up so infrequently that the joy that these systems typically provide is absent as well. After level 4, it takes an eternity from there on out to see the number go up by 1. Being forced to buy most of the weapons feels incredibly arbitrary as well. I mean, why is your score, something that isn't real in this game, your currency to purchase these items? It's honestly fascinating, since they could have easily fixed all of this with a little adjustment to how things unlock and how fast you level up. Remove the currency to buy weapons, and instead of throwing fucking 8 new equipment options at the player when they finally level up, give them 2 new guns for free every time they reach a new rank, increase the max level to 20 or something, and allow the player to gain experience faster. Also, do a little animation or something when the bar reaches the top. As it is now, it's pretty dull. There you go, solved. The increased frequency of levels keeps the player feeling engaged with their character's progress, they're given a manageable amount of weapons to play with each time, and there's no ridiculous money system present at all. I know it feels like I'm nitpicking, just trying to find things to critique about this game, but all of this stuff adds up. Maybe if this wasn't called Earth Defense Force, this wouldn't be something worth complaining about, but it is, and future games kept the same central gameplay loop while improving the overall experience with every iteration. Since I've now said it out loud, it's time to actually nitpick. The civilians and their pathfinding don't make any sense. In a way, it is kind of funny to see a civilian climb every obstacle in front of them, even if it means tearing themselves to shreds on barbed wire, along with running into walls forever since they can't break their straight-line sprint, and deciding that now is the perfect time to flee their city, right when a giant monster is in the streets going crazy. It is funny, however, it's also pretty stupid. Maybe this is me being overly critical, however, since it did make me laugh, and maybe that was the point. If so, hey, good job, devs. While 2017, and every game to an extent, has invisible walls, Insect Armageddon attempts to contextualize theirs by saying the red shields are Ravager technology. They can pass through, but we can't.
They've been erecting some type of shield walls that have made things very difficult. They can get through them. We can't.
Not sure if I really understand why our bullets can go through, but either way, this shield thing wouldn't have even been a blip on the radar for me if not for a few specific levels, most notably the ditch. Sometimes enemies will appear out of reach, and you of course can't get past the red shields, meaning you basically twiddle your thumbs until the enemy emerges. There we go. I just killed the last one.
Apparently not.
Why would they think it's a good idea to trap you in this fucking canal? Not sure why the Ravagers decided to trap us in this ditch in the first place, but fuck if I know. The new reloading mechanic feels lifeless and horrible. It's clearly an attempt at mimicking the Gears of War active reload, but whereas that minigame was snappy and dynamic, this bar thing is the opposite of that. I don't really have a problem with weapons taking a long time to reload in this series. Well, in some ways I do, but I'm more okay with it than I thought I would be. That said, when seeing how long it'll take for a gun to reload in this game, it fills me with a sense of despair. The linear movement of the bar, and the finicky window of time when you're meant to press the button, it just makes me sad, honestly. Missing it doesn't have any negative consequences, however, that was only after a patch it seems like. I bought an Xbox 360 copy of this game, for some reason, since I'm a huge dum-dum, and using that, I was able to say no to the update. Sure enough, missing an active reload will make the bar go ever so slightly slower. The lack of visual flair for when you succeed or fail is pretty hilarious to me, but not in the good way. It makes it feel so stilted and tired, and you'd think, with a game that's trying its hardest to be cool, there would be something to accompany a well-timed active reload. The bar just vanishing like it wasn't even there is just depressing. Super weird that the Jet has the active reloads as well, since they already have an ammo gimmick with their fuel. I'm not sure if this is the case for console, since I didn't play it all the way through on my 360, but on PC, the game does a very poor job of telling you which mission you should be playing next. I'm assuming those green and yellow indicators mean I've done these levels on normal and hard, but nothing tells you if you've done them with specific classes or played them on the remix setting. Worst of all, in my opinion, is that it doesn't save your place when you stop playing and come back. What I mean is, if my friends and I had started the session with Chapter 2 Mission 1 and finished that session after Chapter 2 Mission 4, the next time we play, which could be weeks since they hate the game so much, it defaults the cursor to Chapter 2 Mission 1. It reverts back to the mission you selected the first time on the last play session. Given how samey these levels are, we ended up playing a few missions many more times than we needed to because we literally couldn't tell them apart from each other. If not for the fact that I was recording our sessions, we wouldn't have figured this out. The weapon selections aren't something I went into detail with, but I have to point out how horribly they're organized. The names are all crazy shit I could never remember, meaning I could never assure myself I had one of the few good guns. Worse than that though, it doesn't even show you their names until you hover over them. At a glance, you won't know which one is which, since all you have to go on is their generic JPEG. Maybe if they looked more visually distinct, I would get it, but they don't, so it doesn't make any sense. One final nitpick, but this time on the positive end, I actually like the many stats and numbered achievements for Insect Armageddon. Staring at my lifetime stats and numbers in the game is a guilty pleasure of mine, so I'm happy and also unhappy that I was allowed to indulge. The remix mode is something I think could be very fun for other EDF games. It throws a different assortment of enemies at you each level, instead of the set-in-stone ones seen in the main campaign. Since Insect Armageddon is a mediocre game at best, it's not something spectacular or anything. When trying it out on hard mode, it felt pretty damn difficult with my leveled up tactical class, since armored spiders spilling out instead of ants make certain sections exponentially more challenging, and not necessarily in the fun way. Again, if this game were better made, like 2017 or 4.1, I might have reveled in this adversity, but with how disgusting the shooting feels in Insect Armageddon, it was just a tedious difficulty spike. Since certain enemies normally show up on very specific levels, and the Ops Lady and Lightning talk about the new type of monster every time, it feels a little weird that robot praying mantises can just show up willy-nilly on the first level without anyone acknowledging it. Not a damning quality by any means. If that had happened in a hypothetical remix mode in EDF 4.1, I'd say it's nothing to be annoyed at or anything. It would be pretty neat if there was some extra dialogue for when certain bugs show up in earlier missions, but that would be asking for quite a lot considering these remixed missions aren't the same every time. They change their enemy roster each time you load in. There's also survival mode, which is very boring. You just try to survive as many enemy waves as you can with a limited number of lives. I'm not even sure if this would be a fun mode in the good EDF games, so playing it in Insect Armageddon was just bleh, an afterthought really. That's really what Insect Armageddon is as a whole at this point, an afterthought. There's simply no reason to play this game unless you have a YouTube channel where you do game reviews, you are a very curious gamer who also likes EDF, or your friend has a potato laptop which can't run the better Earth Defense Force games. I'm basically all three of those, which is why I was determined to give this game a fair shake. I tried, I really did, but the game isn't good. The setting is static and bland, the number of missions and the objectives within them are terrible, shooting bugs and robots feels somehow fairly monotonous, even though it's the entire gimmick of the series, and the campy and ridiculous tone that 2017 had in spades is all but replaced with a self-aware jokey joke style of humor. It's great that the online functionality exists, and that this game may have influenced Sandlot to give the 4-class idea a proper go, but the spirit of the mainline EDF games is absent here. This certainly won't be the last spin-off Earth Defense Force game I review on this channel, but I certainly hope it's by far the worst one. Thanks for watching, everyone. If I powered through the editing process like I hope I will, this should be the third video published in September. Hot damn, what a turnaround, baby! If I can get 3 more videos out for October, someone give me a fucking medal. Okay, subscribe to the channel, join the Patreon, bye bye.